Greetings adventurers, and welcome to this tutorial how to play the Age of Adventure RPG, the Deluxe Edition, which is available to download and actually to print. You can see there's have on the screen a copy of the PDF, and you can see there are booklet printing instructions, and the booklet actually looks like this when you do print it. You can print it at home. How's that with my viewing? There you go. And then looks like that as you booklet printing style. So it's 12 pages. Whoa, dropped it. I'm glad that actually came out actually on the video. Character sheet on the back. So that's what we're going to be going over, but as I said, this is the PDF version, so it's a bit easier to explain. So let's just get into it. Age of Adventure, what is it? It's a heroic fantasy tabletop RPG inspired by John Harper's Lasers and Feelings. So it's built on the D6 dice pool mechanic, where your proficiency or your abilities are based on one number only, and that's like a sliding scale. I'm probably getting ahead of myself. So you know that it does use six-sided dice because I mentioned that. And in the PDF, you have all of the rules to cover everything from character creation, stamina and death, and running the game. Let's get straight into it. Character creation is the first thing that I cover. With Age of Adventure, your character is a combination of their community and their role. For the community, there's 6 different communities they can be: dwarf, elf, goblin, halfling, human, and orc. And their role in the game can be either as an archer, a barbarian, a cleric, a rogue, a warrior, or a wizard. Each of these community and roles has 2 skills attached to it. So as an example, an elf is good at acrobatics and pathfinder, and in the roles, an archer would be skilled at launched weapons and throwing one-handed items like daggers. There are magic users in the game. There's 2 types. There's a cleric who has religious or holy spells, and there also is a wizard that has arcane spells, and this will all be covered as we go. As I mentioned prematurely there, that the game is based on the one stat system of lasers and feelings, where the characters have a number assigned to them that ranges between 2 and 5. And it's a sliding scale in that number determines the result or success of all their actions. And there's 2 types of actions you can take. There are might-based actions like physical challenges, climbing, sneaking, climbing, sneaking, fighting, that sort of thing. And mind-based actions like parlaying or lockpicking, avoiding surprise. And if you're good at one thing, then you're not as good as the other thing. So we'll do an example. Say you are an elf archer and you have a proficiency of 4. To fire a arrow would be a might-based action, so you'd have to roll equal or less to 4. But to work out or to parlay or convince a tavern keeper, you would have to roll equal or higher, so 4 or higher. So you can see that the higher the number, the better you are at might-based actions, but the weaker you are at mind-based actions. So, and that's the beauty of lasers and feelings. You have one number between 2 and 5, and that pretty much can be used to cover all the actions in the game. There's also there's steps to create a name, choose a homeland and a goal, and provide an image. And then your character is ready to go on their adventure. Skills is the next section. As I said, there's 2 types of skills. There's either might skills or mind skills. And here is the advantage of having a skill is that you gain a bonus die. Being a D6 dice pool system, the more dice you have, the more chance you have of getting successes. And in this game, you need at least 1 success to perform a standard action, but 2 successes is a guaranteed success. So players should always be aiming to have at least 2 dice to roll so they can try and get those 2 successes. I'm probably jumping ahead of myself again there, but the skills essentially will give you 1 bonus dice. So as an example, let's stick with our Elven Archer. If they're skilled in, launch weapons, so archers are skilled in launch weapons, then they'll get a bonus dice when firing their bow, whereas someone who isn't skilled in that will only have 1 dice. So there is the benefit there. Mind skills, you get a bonus dice in. I think actually the elf was skilled in Pathfinder. Let's have a look. Yeah, Pathfinder. So there's a good example. So elves are skilled in Pathfinder. So Pathfinder is a mind skill. So if that elf was trying to track an enemy, they would need to roll, they get a bonus dice, and their target is, well, in the example I gave before, say if their proficiency was 4, they'd have to roll 4 or higher. So not as good as firing a bow, but still nonetheless not bad at all. And we will go more into how to resolve those successes very shortly. Stamina and death. Age of Adventure is quite a lethal system. Your stamina is your proficiency number. So our archer would have a stamina of 4 with a proficiency number of 4. If their stamina goes below 0, they're dead. There's no resurrection. Well, there's none in my game and none in the rules as written. So that character is finished. If their stamina is 0, they are incapacitated and they're dying, and they need to be helped within a certain amount of rounds, or their character is also dead. So whenever I run Age of Adventure, I always provide the trigger warning that there is possible character death. You can also be healed, various means there, healing kit, magic items, etc, etc. So the best way is obviously not to be hit, but there is healing available as well. The game also has a meta currency called hero points. I quite like this, not unique to Age of Adventure, but whenever a character performs an action, they can use a hero point to add 1 dice to the dice pool. So there's a chance, a way to improve your number of dice. They can use a hero point to re-roll all their dice, but then they have to keep the new result. They can use a hero point to add an extra point of damage after successfully hitting, or they can use a hero point to gain insight, and that's used, I guess, if the hero is particularly stuck or the party is like, needs more information about some in-game world thing. They can ask a specific question, or the character that uses that hero point, and the GM will tell you the truth. And in the game, it's as if the character has some knowledge of this somehow, which you can roleplay. All characters start with 1 dice worth of hero points, so between 1 and 6, but the maximum number of hero points at any time is 6 and the minimum is 0. So for example, if our Elven Archer rolled 4 hero points to start, and then on one of their actions they wanted to increase their dice pool by 1 dice, their hero points would go down to 3. We will cover very shortly how you can gain hero points, but that's essentially how to use them and how many you get. Alright, the crux of Age of Adventure is proficiency checks. The character will need to make a proficiency check whenever they perform an action, or are needed to make a reaction. But on a hero's turn, they can perform 1 action. When an encounter acts against them, they make a reaction, and in all instances, only the players roll dice. So sorry GMs, it's only your players that will be rolling for their successful actions, and also whether they can defend or negate the enemy actions. So proficiency checks, how does it work? I mentioned before, everyone has a dice pool, or the game uses a dice pool, and everyone starts with 1 dice in their dice pool, but then they'll add an extra dice if they're skilled. So as I mentioned with our Elven Archer, they would have 2 dice if they were firing a bow. You also can increase your dice pool by being prepared. And prepared is when you burn your action to prepare to gain a bonus in the next action. So again, Elven Archer, instead of firing that arrow with 2 dice, they decide to prepare and aim. So they can't fire that arrow this round, but the next round on their action, they'll get a bonus dice. So they'll have 3 dice because they prepared to aim. You can also increase your dice pool by being helped, and that's where another character burns their action to say how they help you. They make their proficiency check, and if they do succeed, you'll gain a bonus dice to your action. So there's teamwork in effect there. And the last way you can gain a bonus dice in your dice pool is if you have the required item. So for example, someone trying to pick locks, we'll use our Alpha as an example. They're trying to pick locks. They're not skilled in it, so they only have 1 dice, but they have a Tinker Tool kit or a lockpick set, for want of a better term, that will give them a bonus dice to pick that lock. There are also penalties, which are covered with special actions, which we'll look at a bit later. But essentially your GM can provide penalties for, or put in penalties for hazardous conditions, etc. And if you don't have any dice to roll after penalties, then you automatically fail. So once you've determined your dice pool with those rules, it's time to roll to see how many successes. As I mentioned, you're looking at least 1 success for a standard success, or 2 or more successes is versus a hard success, which is like a guaranteed success. If you get 2 successes, you know that you've succeeded in your action. And the way it works is that when you roll your dice, so if we look at our Elven Archer that had 3 dice to fire an arrow, every dice result is compared individually to the proficiency number. So if our Elven Archer fired the arrow with 3 dice with a proficiency of 4 and rolled a 2, 4 and 5, they need to roll equal or under. So the 5 would be a fail, but the 2 and the 4 would be 2 successes, because they've got 2 dice results that are equal or under. Remember, might actions need to roll equal or under their proficiency, and in this case they got 2 successes, so they know that they have essentially succeeded, a guaranteed success in their action. If they only got 1 success, they may not have succeeded, because that's only good against a standard check or challenge, which we will look at later in the GM section, determine the challenge level of a particular action. Now, I touched on that hero points, you can use them, but you can also replenish them. And how do you do that? Right here. If you roll your number exactly and the action succeeds, you gain a hero point. So that is how you can rebuild your hero points. Very importantly, there are some exclusions. You don't get a hero point for reactions, like defending against enemies' attack. You don't get a hero point for helping, so it can be teamwork, but you're not going to get a hero point to do it. And you don't get a hero point for junk rolls. So if someone wants to attack a tree for some reason, yeah, okay, you can roll your might, but you're not going to get a hero point for doing that. There has to be some sort of challenge that the DM determines is applicable, or some sort of consequence of the action. And also here, the maximum number of hero points you can gain regardless of the number of successes is 1. So in our example with our Elf Archer, if they had 3 dice to perform a particular action and their proficiency was 4, and they rolled 2 4s and a 1, that would be 3 successes. Okay, so which is 2 or more successes. So they've done it, no problem. They rolled 2 4s, but they only get 1 hero point. If they are on 6, which is the maximum, any hero points gained beyond 6 are forfeited. And that, my friends, is pretty much summarizing how the Age of Adventure RPG system works. So what are the other pages left? We're halfway there. Well, there's a whole section on magic and spells. So as I mentioned, there's 2 types of spellcasters in the game. There are wizards and clerics. Importantly, casting spells, even though you're skilled, you don't get the skilled bonus for spell casting, and that's because they're unique. No one else can perform those actions, so you only get 1 dice to roll. So you need to prepare or use a hero point to get a bonus dice if you need it. You also need to be unrestrained, able to speak, holding a spell casting item, which you get as a default, and succeed a mind check. And the number of successes works the same as proficiency checks. Now you might be thinking, why have you made spells harder? Because it does seem harder, because if our archer, for example, skilled in launch weapons has 2 dice, but our cleric skilled in casting spells only gets 1 dice. Well, the reason is that they can cast spells an unlimited number of times. So the wizard has all of these arcane spells, things like Missile and Darksea, and the Cleric has all these holy spells, including healing and blessing. You can still only perform one action per round, but they can cast Bless this round, cast Bless the next round, cast Heal the next round. The only thing is, A, they have to succeed their action, obviously, and they have to make sure they don't roll any ones on the D6 with 0 successes, because if that happens, they get drained of 1 stamina point, and that's called spell drain. So even though you can cast any number of spells, cast each round, this spell drain stops spellcasters casting unnecessarily, just to try to get hero points, for example, because there's a chance that you will get drained in casting that spell. Equipment, we've got 1.5 pages on equipment. Aside from the fact that we've got a whole list of equipment here, from 1 gold piece, 3 gold piece, 6 gold piece value. The thing I probably will highlight with Age of Adventure, again, not unique to role-playing games, especially old school ones, is that it uses a slot system. So here you'll see that the carry capacity of heroes is their proficiency number plus 6. So with our Elven Archer, with a proficiency of 4, they have 10 slots, so they can carry 10 items. Now some things weigh 0, so 0 slot items, things like your clothing, backpack and coin pouch, no problems, but everything else weighs 1 slot. So if they carry a tinderbox, that's 1 slot. If they carry a shield, that's 1 slot. Some things have, like consumables, you carry up to 6 units of that in 1 slot. So torches, you can carry 6 units. And also I think healing kit or healing herbs, you can also carry 6 units, as well as standard equipment for the heroes. You can also purchase animal companions, like trained animals, and there's different prices for small all the way to large, like a horse. And you can hire hirelings, or load bearers as I like to call them, and they are 6 gold pieces. They actually start with a skill and a role, a community and a role skill. So for example, if our archer hired another elven archer, they would start with one of the community skills and one of the role skills for elven archer. But with hirelings and animal companions, you'll see here, for actions and reactions, the player rolls 1 dice for them, and they only succeed on a roll of 1. So a 1 is 1 success. So they're not as effective as player characters, which is how it should be, but they are useful for increasing your carry capacity, because essentially they can carry, as an example, hirelings can carry 6 items, so they can help you carry torches and your provisions and stuff like that. So they can be useful, but they do cost 6 gold pieces, and then you need to also equip them, look after them in brackets, but you need to equip them, and you do have to pay them before they start the adventure for any heroes thinking to do the dirty on them. There are some things like potions and scrolls that you can get as well, which are also 6 gold pieces, and each of those also take 1 slot each. That is correct. So slot system for equipment. The last 3 pages are the Game Master section. So players can read this section because Age of Adventure is a role-playing game system, so it doesn't hurt if they read this section, but I've defined it as a Game Master section, so the players don't really need to know this section if they were wanting to look at the rules. A little reminder here for GMs, unfortunately those GMs that like rolling a lot of dice, only the players roll dice. So there's some random generators, mishaps, consequences, how long it takes to travel location, weather. Look, GMs could probably roll for this if you wanted, but I always let the players roll. Let's roll for the time of day. Something happens, you get tumbled in a river, falling off the edge of a waterfall. Let's roll for an item mishap. They can roll, etc., etc. Ranges. There are 3 ranges in the game. Again, not unique for old school type games. There's melee, which is close combat. touching, passing items to each other. Near distance, which is for throwing distance, and also your free move distance. So every character gets one free move and then their action, and there's no attacks of opportunity, so you can move a near distance out of combat if you need to. Of course, the enemy can then move a near distance to engage you, but nonetheless, there's no attacks of opportunity. And then there's far distance. So things like launch weapons for our archer, get that far distance. And also casting spells is also a far distance. We've got some additional rules there for items that cause fire and oil. Also some special damage like diseases and curses. So we've got all that covered for the Game Master. Don't you worry about that. Turn order. We use, which is other words for initiative essentially, but turn order. At the start of combat, you can roll 6 dice high to low. Hirelings and animal companions act on their hero's turn. And I've also got a little note here that turn order can also be used outside of combat to ensure all players get equal game opportunities. So I often use turn order, especially online, just so that everyone's getting a good turn or the same amount of opportunity. Whether they decide to do anything or not, it's up to them, but essentially turn order works high to low. And on the hero's turn, they can perform one action, use a skill, cast a spell, and there also is some free actions like speaking and drawing weapons, dropping stuff, delaying, and reactions. As I mentioned before, you don't get any hero points for reactions, but you can defend every attack. So if you get attacked 4 times, you can do an automatic proficiency check for each of those defenses, whereas on your action, you only get 1 action. On the enemy's turn, the hero makes a free reaction check, which I've already covered. If it's a mental attack, if the enemy is using their mind or doing a mind attack, like casting a spell at them or something, then the hero has to do a mind check to resist that. And if it's a physical attack, they need to do a might check. And for physical attacks, characters can choose to either dodge or block. Remember, you get 1 dice in your dice pool. So if you dodge, you avoid all damage. If you block and you're using a shield, you actually get a bonus dice. Remember earlier, if you have an applicable item, you get a bonus dice. So to block, you'll get 2 dice, but blocking only reduces damage by 1 point. So if something was to cause 2, you would still get 1 point damage. Whereas if you dodged, harder to dodge, you would avoid all damage. Failing, if enemy inflicts damage, etc. Some rules for surprise. Damage there, you can see, as I did mention before, game can be quite lethal. Most things do 1 or 2 points damage. For our Alf Archer, as an example, with a proficiency of 4, they would have stamina 4, so 2 hits at 2 damage, they're at 0 and they're dying. So it can be quite lethal. There are also some rules for special actions, which I mentioned before when it came to doing proficiency checks, but things like call shots, defending multiple attacks, doing an extra hit, that sort of thing. So all the rules are covered for all of the things that could and may happen in combat and in regards to doing damage. And then we get to the last page, well, not including the character sheet, which is on the back, which you can use and print off to play the game, but you can see there is not much to record, so you could just use a scrap of paper. But the last section is the encounter section, or the encounter table, which I've got here for GMs. I'll go over this briefly, because for encounters, we're not just talking about enemies, we're talking about any hazard, trap, obstacle, etc. And for an encounter, when the GM is creating their adventure or converting an adventure, they need to determine what's the size of the encounter, how many actions does it get, and how difficult it is, or the challenge rating. Once they've got those 3 things, the encounter will be ready. And I break down each of those here. The size, which is also used for damage, determines the encounter's base stamina, and you can get some bonuses. So here on the table, size, which is base stamina, you can see here a medium target, say an ogre, or someone is an ogre. Yeah, no, we'll say an orc. Well, no, not an orc. We'll say an ogre. A medium-sized ogre, the same size as a hero. They would have a stamina of 3, and they would do 1 to 2 points of natural damage if they were using their claws or their fist. Actions is how many attacks or targets they can focus on their turn. And whereas heroes only get one action, you can see here that encounters can have up to 3 actions to make them a bit more difficult. And the last thing is the challenge, how difficult they are to hit or how difficult they are to defend against. A little note here, the GM keeps the challenge number secret until the encounter is engaged with or has been otherwise determined. And you can see there's 2 challenge ratings, 1 or 2, 2 being hard, and that's the number of successes the hero needs. Like I mentioned before with proficiency checks, getting 1 success, which is a standard success, may not be enough if the challenge is actually hard. So I do have an example breakdown here, but I'll just do a more simpler one for the tutorial. Say our Elven Archer, because I've used that the whole time, say they are firing that arrow after being aimed. They've got 3 dice, okay, so they're pretty confident, and they're firing at an enemy that you've created as a standard challenge. They only need 1 success. So as long as one of those dice was 4 or under, they would hit that target. But say they were firing at a hard challenge, perhaps the captain of the guard or someone more skilled. If they only got 1 success, that would not be enough. So you could narrate that to mean they miss or it's deflected by the enemy, etc. And you only get a hero point if the action is successful. So even if that archer rolls 3 dice, they get 1 success and it's a 4, and they think, oh, I rolled my proficiency number, I rolled a 4. As a GM, you have to be quick and say, unfortunately, you got 1 success. That's not enough to hit the target. So immediately that player knows, wow, okay, this is a hard challenge. I need to make sure I get 2 successes. I think that's probably a nicer example than this one here where I've broken down various enemy. But the reason I have encounter, the size, actions, and challenge rating is so that you as a GM can determine the encounter level of the encounter. So encounter level is a multiplication of the size, the actions, and the challenge. So a size 3 encounter with 1 action and 2 challenge rating would be 6. So 3 times 1 by 2. So expressed as encounter level 6, 312, and the stamina, as we mentioned, is equal to their size. So the 3 would be the stamina. There are some rules for armor and shields and that sort of thing, but the main reason I'm going over encounter level is that if you do want more balanced combat, which, you know, in old school games, there's no reason why there needs to be, but I use it, and I know a lot of GMs and players like encounters to be balanced. You can calculate a hero party encounter level where each hero is worth 6 and then each hireling is worth 2, for example, and then you can actually work out what the encounter difficulty level is or encounter level is and make sure it's close or equal to the hero party encounter level. And that's the example I gave there. So there are rules to make encounters more balanced. Last but not least, to finish this tutorial, is there are rules for campaign play. They're not as detailed as a lot of other games, being a rule set that's effectively 10 pages. Essentially, Age of Adventure, more designed for one shots, but if you do want to bring your character into the next game, after a successful adventure, you get 2 rewards. You get some gold pieces, 6 plus 2 dice gold pieces, and you start the next adventure with 1 extra hero point, so plus 1 hero point in the next adventure. Note that the maximum is still 6, but you've got more chance, obviously, of starting with 6 on the next adventure. There also is a roll that's made after every successful adventure that applies to the party, where someone in the team rolls 1 dice, and if they roll a 1, one random member of the party achieves their goal. If you remember, when you create your character, there is an optional section for creating your goal. So there's a 1 in 6 chance that someone in the party either achieves their goal or gains a magical artifact. So again, I mentioned there are things like potions and spells, but a magical artifact is something that requires recharging and a mind check to complete. So with magical artifacts, this is some 2 rolls you make to determine what they get. So on a roll of 1 to 5, it's a standard artifact with a mind check. If they roll a 6 on that, it's actually a fabled artifact, and there is no mind check required. So say for example and this magical artifact can be anything your mind can determine and agreed on between the player and the GM. There are supplements in Age of Adventure for magical artifacts, some examples, but essentially you can agree on whatever. But say it's say it is a arrow of accuracy, or like a magical, they find a magical bow that can fire arrows. If it's a standard artifact, then they make a mind check, and then that creates the magical arrow that fires automatically for 2 successes. So no roll required to hit, it's just the mind check. But if it was a fabled artifact, then they could conjure that arrow, it would hit a target, no mind check required. So good times for the player character that finds that baby. There's also a roll you need to make to see if the artifact is a touch item or a ranged item. So there's some rules there for, you know, getting players more powerful for subsequent adventures. As I mentioned, on the back page we have a character sheet, and that pretty much completes my tutorial of the Age of Adventure RPG. Please reach out to me if you do have any questions. My details are all in my card, which will be in the description. I am active on Discord if you want to play Age of Adventure. I try and run 2 one-shots every month, and I welcome new players. And otherwise, I look forward to hearing from you if there is any feedback, and if not, then I wish you happy adventuring and thank you for watching. See you later.